All right, so it looks like we are now recording. So thank you for joining us. I am Dr. Mitch Hopsa, and today I'll be presenting on fellowships for graduate study in STEM and the social sciences. And this is part of the programming that we offer at the Office of National Scholarship Advisement. So what exactly do national scholarships and fellowships mean? So these are awards that are going to be external to ASU. So this means that they are open to national and international competition. So it isn't only just ASU students applying to these opportunities. It's going to be students from across the United States and, depending on the award, potentially across the globe. They are highly competitive in nature because we have a lot of people applying, and there are only so many awards offered. And so applicants have to put together really good applications, really persuasive arguments as to why they're a good fit for the award. And because of that, universities such as ASU invest in resources such as the Office of National Scholarships Advisement in order to aid students in putting together competitive applications. They are often merit-based, so they're not needs-based. So a needs-based scholarship is where someone puts in an application, they say that they have some kind of financial need, and they have to demonstrate that, and then they're given an award. That's not what these awards are generally. These are going to be, they want to put forth the best scientists, the leaders in their fields, the best leaders that they can get from the social sciences as well, right? That's who they're funding. And so that's what's important to bring to life on paper in an application, is how you're a leader in your field, because it's completely merit-based. They are often mission driven. So many of these fellowships that we're going to discuss today aren't just handing out money to hand out money. They want to see a specific impact in the world fulfilled. And instead of putting that money into research on the solution, they've decided to invest in people who can conduct that research. And so we'll talk about some of the missions of the awards that we're talking about today. And so an important thing to illustrate when you're applying to some of these competitive awards is how you're a good fit for their mission and how you can help deliver their mission for them. And they are extremely prestigious. So having one of these awards on your resume, on your CV, will speak volumes. So if you are a burgeoning scientist and you receive an NSF GRFP, that says a lot, both when you're applying to graduate school, if you have gotten the award before going to graduate school, and also when you are on the job market later looking for jobs. And so these awards speak volumes to the people who you're going to be interacting with in your professional career after receiving the award. All right, so what exactly can these awards provide? They can do many things. They may do all of these things. They may do some of these things. So overall, most of the time, graduate level fellowships are going to provide some kind of funding. This can be stipends. So instead of having a research assistantship where you're working in someone else's lab and making money as a graduate student, or a teaching assistantship where you're teaching classes so you can make money as a graduate student, they give you a stipend so that you don't have to work as an RA or a TA and you can focus on your own research. So many of these awards will offer a stipend. Some of them will also offer tuition, some kind of tuition reimbursement. I want to be careful with how I say that, because sometimes they don't always offer a full ride. Sometimes they have to work with the institution that you plan on attending, and they work out some kind of deal. So that's not one size fits all. Everyone gets tuition for every award, right? So you have to figure out what's offered by each award. They provide access to opportunities that others do not have access to. And when we talk about the specific awards, you'll see how that plays out differently with each award. It's heavily individualistic. They offer experiences. So some of them will offer internships. Some of them can be actually going and conducting research abroad, or others allow you to focus on your own research. So they give you some kind of experience. A part of that experience also is networking. So some of the awards that we're going to talk about today actually have really robust networks in which people are able to gain access to career opportunities that they may not have otherwise had access to if they were not one of those fellows. So that's another added benefit here. So it's not just prestigious on your resume or your CV, but the access you get to others who are in the same network can really move your career forward. And they provide training sometimes. So some of these experiences, as I said before, have internships. And so that can be training for how to conduct research in your field. And they also provide status, being able to say that you are a Fulbright grantee or that you're an NSF fellow. Those are great things to have under your belt. And it helps people understand the kind of researcher, the kind of student you are, because it means you've gone through a vetting process. Others have looked at your application, they've decided that you are a leader in your field, and they have given you an award to advance your participation in your field so that you can become a leader in your field. So really, your life changes after winning one of these awards. All right, so what is ONSA? The Office of National Scholarships Advisement. So you'll see on this slide that is our wall of fame. So these are all students who have won awards in the past, and it's beyond this wall. We have many of the walls in this building in Honors Hall have these kinds of photos on them. And so what we do is promote national scholarships and fellowships, and I've already explained what that means. We target and recruit ASU applicants, such as the information session that we're having today, the outreach that we conducted for this session. We advise ASU students and alumni through application processes. So if you are about to graduate and you're like, I don't know if I can actually apply to one of these that's due in the fall, you absolutely can work with us, even if you're an alumni. So you don't have to be currently enrolled at ASU to be able to work with us. You either have to be enrolled or be an alumni in order to get assistance with your application. And we'll talk more about what that advising looks like holistically towards the end. We manage nomination processes. So some awards require a campus nomination. That means you have to go through a screening process on campus, and then the campus says, 10 people wanted to apply to this. These are the 4 best people. We're putting these 4 people forward. And so it's kind of like a seal of approval from the university itself before we send them to the foundation. Not every award that we're talking about today has this kind of process, but it's just something to be aware of that we work with students on. And we develop programming and curriculum for ASU students. So a lot of the work that we do on our applications, in addition to advising and offering these information sessions, is giving writing support and providing writing support. We just wrapped up a class where we talked with students, like a 3-credit course, about how to write personal statements. And we have all kinds of programming over the summer and throughout the semesters that provides writing support. So some of these will be workshops. Some of these are just drop-in working hours where you just drop in and work on your essays. Or you can have one-on-one meetings with an advisor such as myself to talk about your writing, talk about your essays. And all of that is to help you put the best application you can forward, because remember, these are very competitive opportunities. And so we want you to put your best foot forward, and we want you to be able to speak the best to your talents and ambitions in your application. And so that's something that we work with you on in the application process. All right, so before we get into the specific awards, we're going to talk about a couple of facts. So fact number 1, national scholarships and fellowships are incredibly competitive. That can sound a little intimidating because you're like, well, if it's super competitive, why should I apply? There are many benefits to applying to an award that go beyond trying to win the award. Something that I try to encourage students to think about is you have to plan as if you're not going to win the award. You still have to, if you're like, okay, I'm going to go study abroad next year, I'm going to apply to this opportunity to study abroad. You still have to plan your life as if that might not happen, so that you have a backup plan. You want to have multiple backup plans for different contingencies, especially if you're applying to multiple awards, because they're so highly competitive. Sometimes I've seen reviewer feedback to where they're like, this person was fantastic, they were great, we just didn't have enough money, and they have to split hairs. And so there's lots of people out there who are leaders in their field. There's lots of people out there who are excellent students. And so you're competing against them. And one reason why you want to work with our office is to make sure you are absolutely putting your best foot forward. And so don't get discouraged by the fact that they're very competitive. Instead, see it as an opportunity to be able to really enhance the way in which you communicate your goals, the way in which you communicate the impact you want to make on the world, and how you tell your story as a person, as an individual, as a member of your field. That's something you can get a lot of practice with in a fellowship application, such as the ones we're going to talk about today. You can't quite get that practice in cover letters or in writing about your research, because they're not asking you to really talk about yourself in that way. So this is a great opportunity to learn about yourself and the impact you want to make on the world, even if it is super competitive. many of our applicants have come to us at the end of an application cycle, even if they didn't get it. And they said, this was really good for me. I learned a lot about myself, and I feel like I can write much better than I did before I started this application. So there's bonus benefits. So don't get discouraged by the fact that it's highly competitive, but be realistic and practical about that information. All right, fact number 2. Probably already guessed this, but the application process can be challenging. You had to be prepared to work hard. So this isn't something where we write one first draft the day before the deadline, submit it, and hope for the best. The best will not happen if that's what happens. You want to work on multiple drafts. You want to get feedback from multiple readers, from your faculty mentors, from an advisor at ONSA, potentially even your peers if we're hosting peer review sessions. And that can help you put together a really strong application. And you're going to work on multiple drafts. So this isn't just you write one first draft, we give you some feedback, and then the next draft is a final draft. It takes a lot of time to kind of dig deeper, to figure out how to explain your motivations, your values, your convictions, and the impact you want to have. But for any award that also requires you to put together a research plan or a proposal, those take time. Any of you who have ever participated in some kind of research design know that that does not happen in a day. It takes time to talk with faculty mentors and get a sense of what methods and methodology are appropriate for what you're trying to do. How do you pose an appropriate research question? How do you describe aims and outcomes that match your research question? And how do you communicate this to someone who can't ask you any questions and will never meet you, right? And so there's a lot of contingencies at work here. And so it takes work to get a strong application together. But again, the payoff is worth it because then you know how to explain your research and you know how to explain why you're conducting that research. Fact number 3, you're not in this alone. We're here to help. And again, we'll talk more about what that help looks like, but we offer advising where we just meet with you, go over eligibility requirements. If you're reading over something on the website and you're like, I don't understand what this means to me as an applicant, we're here to help you work through that. We read through these websites over and over again. It's our jobs, right? So someone like one of your faculty mentors who's not familiar with the award, you really can't ask them to help you navigate the specific selection criteria or what readers are looking for if they don't have any experience with that, right? But we have experience with that information. So we have specific knowledge that we can provide to you to help you put together a competitive application. With that said, everyone is here to help. Rely on your community to help you put together a competitive application. So it's not just everything is us, but instead it's working with your faculty mentors, working with your peers, and working with us can help you really put together a really strong, comprehensive application. So don't go at it alone, right? Make sure you're relying on others to put your best foot forward. All right, fact number 4, we do win. So here's some numbers from the past 10 years. So you can get a sense of how many students from ASU have won awards that have worked with our office. So, you know, Rhodes Scholarships, incredibly prestigious and incredibly competitive. In the past 10 years, we have had 3 Rhodes Scholars, 5 Marshall Scholars. One number that we really like to point to is our number of Fulbright recipients, which is 180 Fulbright recipients in the past 10 years. And Fulbright is one of the awards that we're talking about today. So working with us does yield better results than going at it alone. And that's something to consider when you are seriously deliberating about applying to one of these awards, excuse me. So before we get into the specifics of the awards, I would just like to demonstrate how to make an appointment with our office. So if you go to our website, you'll see that the home button is right there. So if you ever need to get back to our main page, you can find additional information on certain opportunities by clicking Apply Now up in that menu. And then to make an appointment, you see it's a big yellow button right there on the main page. So it's really easy. You just make an appointment and you'll want to make sure that you're selecting an appointment type that is appropriate for you. So if you're thinking about applying to NSF GRFP, please pick the specific option for that. And if you don't see the specific award you're applying to, if you want to work with me on any award that has to do with graduate school, even if you're an undergraduate student, just choose General Graduate Advising. as your option. If you don't choose the correct option, you might end up making an appointment with someone else who doesn't work on these graduate awards. And that's probably not the results that you want, right? So to make sure you end up in the right place, choose either the specific award that you want to apply to or general graduate advising if you intend to apply to an award that somehow funds graduate school, with the exception of a few other awards, but those will be named on the page. So to get started on an application, you want to figure out what's your objective. So earlier I mentioned that these are mission-driven awards, right? So for example, the NSF GRFP, they want to fund the future of scientific leaders in the United States, not just in STEM, but in the social and behavioral sciences as well. And what that means is it's not just someone who's conducting research in a lab, they're the best person in their lab, but there's someone who is conducting research that can have a broader impact on their community and the nation. And so that's their mission. And so does that align with your objectives as a student? And you want to think about your relationship to a fellowship's mission as reciprocal. So you give them something that helps fulfill their mission, and they give you something that helps fulfill your own development, right? So it's a reciprocal relationship. You are both giving to each other, and you're both getting something out of that relationship too. So you always want to put your objective first. What is your goal? Where are you going with all of this? And that's something we can also talk about in an advising session. If you don't quite have a clear answer for that, that's something that we work through when working through multiple drafts. So don't think that you have to have like the best answer in the world that's going to win you a Nobel Peace Prize like on the first day. You're not ready for that, right? But our mentorship will help you get there. Make sure that you're exploring available resources. So work with us, make sure that you know how our resources work and how you could take best advantage of them. Work with your writing center if that's something that would be appropriate for your application and something that you would like to do as a writer. Work with your faculty mentors and make sure that you're also relying on other resources available in the community that can help improve your application. For example, making sure that you are making strong relationships with your reference letter writers. They are also resources, right? So they should know who you are. They should know who your goals are. And that doesn't happen with just asking for a letter. It happens in having conversations with them and getting to know them too. Make lists. Make lists of the graduate schools you want to go to. Make list of the awards you want to apply to. Make a list of the different impacts you want to have in the world or the different trajectories or paths that you could take, right? You don't have to decide on just one thing right now. But think about what your options are. Map them out. Put it on a dry erase board. You don't have to decide on what just one thing to get started. Keep your options open so that way you don't feel like everything is hinging on one opportunity. Make sure you're seeking advising, so come and talk to us. We often tell applicants that this is a relationship that you're entering in. So it's not just you meet with us once or you come to one info session and then you go off and complete 5 different applications and win all 5 of them. Like this is an ongoing relationship. We work together through time over and over again, right? So make sure you're seeking out those resources and using them to your best advantage. Coming to an advisor the day before a deadline to have them look at a first draft is not using that to your advantage, right? So make time in your trajectory, plan that out so that you're using your resources to the maximum. And that goes into the final point. Make sure you're crafting a timeline too, figuring out when all those deadlines are and what else is due. You know, when are your final essays due for a certain class, or when are some deadlines due for publications or conference proposals, right? You all have a lot going on in your lives as students. And so you want to figure out how does an application fit into your already busy life. It does take a little bit of sacrificing some time, some energy, some resources, but planning that out in the beginning helps you not get burnt out by the end, because then you're prepared for how much it's going to take to make sure that you put together a competitive application. All right, so the first award that we're going to talk about today is the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship. So this specific award is for funding future leaders in STEM, STEM education in the social and behavioral sciences. There are some exceptions to this. For example, they don't necessarily always fund medical research or research that has medical outcomes, but don't let that dissuade you. If you are doing some research that's adjacent to medicine, have a conversation with an advisor like me about whether your research fits into what the NSF is looking for, and we'll talk about that. But overall, it covers many different fields. So you can be in civil engineering, you can even be in linguistics and apply to an NSF graduate research fellowship. So it is wide ranging in the number of fields and disciplines that it supports. It's a 5-year fellowship, 3 years of funding for graduate study. So you are a fellow for the entire time that you're in a PhD program, but it's just 3 years of funding. So your other 2 years of funding would either come from the institution or some other source. But what those 3 years of funding means is that you aren't being a teaching assistant or a research assistant during those 3 years. You get to just focus on your research, what you want to do as a graduate student for those 3 years. So that's a pretty great deal. It is an annual stipend of $37,000 as of last year. They have not announced the award amount this year, so that could change. The cost of education allowance is $12,000 to the institution, which means the institution sometimes offers to just offer you a full ride with the supplementation of what the NSF is offering. That varies from institution to institution. So ASU, for example, if you are an NSF graduate research fellow, they will just waive tuition for you. So that's really great when you're thinking about how do you get funding for graduate school. There is no postgraduate study service requirement, so you don't have to do anything for the National Science Foundation when you're done. Some of these awards do require that you do something post-graduation. NSF does not have that. And there's access to supplemental funding to sustain research while on medical deferral. So it's not just those $37,000. Actually, there is, you can apply for additional funds if necessary. And some of these other awards that we're going to talk about have similar awards for students. And again, the National Graduate Research Fellowship is really interested in leaders in STEM, social sciences and behavioral sciences, who are going to make a broader social impact. So this isn't just being a great researcher in your lab. It means that you're figuring out how to translate that out into a larger community, or you are mentoring others in your community, doing some kind of public outreach, but you're not just in a lab. You're thinking about how research is positioned in the world at large, and you already have a demonstrated commitment to that. So this isn't just something that you're adding. You're just telling readers in the application, yes, I care about the outside world. One day I will share my research with others. They want to see someone who's already doing that. Right. The next fellowship are GEM fellowships. And so fellowships is plural. They have a couple of different options. So they have support for masters in engineering and STEM, and support for PhD students in engineering and STEM as well. And so these awards vary greatly. So their stipends are going to vary a little bit. For the master's, it's $4,000 per semester for 4 semesters. And for the PhD, it's $16,000 for 1 year. And with the GEM fellowships, they are scaled. So if you apply to GEM and you don't get the award that includes a stipend and an internship, they can work out a deal with the university in which you get some kind of tuition discount or some kind of other award, but that varies from institution to institution. One thing about the GEM one thing about the GEM fellowship is that there is only a limited number of universities that participate as host institutions, as member institutions. And so if you're thinking about applying to GEM, you're going to want to check out that list to make sure the graduate schools you're applying to are member universities. So this fellowship only works at those member universities, and what kind of fellowship you get depends on the university that you are going to use it at. At ASU, for example, the only GEM fellowship that we support students for right now, currently, is the one that has the stipend, and it includes the summer internships. The other ones we don't currently support. So it will provide also full tuition and fees by a GEM University member. And one required part of the GEM fellowship, if you get the employer fellowship, is that you work for a summer internship with a GEM employer member. And so there's so many employer members. It includes Ford, Apple, IBM, and some national laboratories. And so these are highly competitive jobs that people, like getting that experience at those work locations, that's really going to improve your resume. And so the whole idea here is to give students practical work experience that they can use while also supporting their development as researchers in graduate school. GEM fellowships are specifically geared towards students of certain identities from certain backgrounds and populations. And so you'll want to look at their eligibility requirements to make sure that you are eligible for this award. In addition to all of these benefits, access to the GEM Alumni Network and meetups with GEM Fellows is an additional benefit. And last fall, I was at a GEM event where they were presenting on GEM to students. It was in downtown Phoenix, and I can say I could see that networking in action. There were faculty members who were GEM Fellows like 20 years ago who knew each other, were having conversations with each other, and talked about how having a GEM fellowship put them in a certain kind of network in which they were able to seek career advancement that they otherwise would not have had access to, right? So we've all heard the saying, it's all about who you know. Well, the GEM fellowship is definitely about that, right? It's about giving students access to opportunities that they may not otherwise have access to. And that's their core mission. So another award that we can support an application for is the Hertz Fellowship. So this is a highly competitive STEM fellowship. So this just supports research in STEM. So not the social sciences and behavioral sciences necessarily, although you would want to look at who has received the award. So one thing that they say on their website is that they really don't narrow it down to specific disciplines or research areas, but rather they're interested in who's going to be a leader and an innovator in their field. So I was just looking through the recipient list the other day with a student so we could get a sense of who had won this before, and we saw that like linguistics was a field on there. Not necessarily, that's not a hard STEM field, right? But that just gives you an example, but sociology was not. So you want to look around and look at the website, look at the recipients to get a sense of if your research area fits in. But if you are in like engineering or life sciences or something like that, you're probably good with the Hertz Fellowship. They specifically want to see people who are going to be innovators, who are going to be change makers in their field, but you're also asked to make a moral commitment to use your knowledge and your abilities during the time of a national crisis. So that's what makes Hertz a little bit different than some of these other awards. That's their investment, that's their mission, and they really want to see top-notch scientists who can do that. So last year we did have a semifinalist for the award, and she conducted some interviews with them, and these were highly technical interviews. So they asked her to, execute some mathematical equations like on the spot. Like they asked her a question and she had to give an answer right there. So that's something to think about if you're thinking about applying to this award, is they're really looking for students who are like the best at what they do. The stipend can vary. So it starts at $38,000. It can be combined with awards like NSF and like the NSF GRFP. So they say that if you get an NSF and you get a Hertz, they will figure out how to combine that so you're getting the best deal possible, so you don't have to feel like you have to choose one over the other. And it includes extra support for parents. So for anyone who is going to graduate school with children, you win a Hertz, you get a little bit of extra money for childcare from the Hertz Fellowship, which is actually pretty unique for a fellowship. So I thought that was a pretty cool detail. And they also provide full tuition or the equivalent of full tuition at participating institutions. So much like the GEM Fellowship, the Hertz Foundation has partner institutions. And so if you have to make sure if you're applying to the Hertz Fellowship, that you are also applying to graduate schools that are on their list of participating institutions. The Quad Fellowship is a newer fellowship. So last year was the first time that they ran a cycle. ASU had the great luck of having 2 students win the Quad Fellowship out of 25 Americans who won it. So the idea of the Quad Fellowship is for 4 Quad countries, the United States, Australia, India, and Japan, to come together and conduct collaborative research and conversations about STEM policy that can transcend national borders and that they can really work together on addressing some of the major issues that we are now facing in our world. So it's a one-time award of $50,000 for students. That's a lot of money. And they also, you can apply for need-based funding up to $25,000 once you're a fellow. So once you're made a fellow, you get $50,000. If you still have need-based funding, you can make an application for an up to additional $25,000. So part of this programming is you participate in collaborative research retreat with fellows from the Quad countries. I think next year that retreat is, or this year, the retreat is in Australia. They haven't announced what it is for next year. So it will be in one of the 4 Quad countries, and it will be 25 fellows from each country. So 25 students from the US, 25 students from Japan, 25 students from India, and 25 students from Australia come together and work together as a team, and not only conduct research, but also go to programming together. Again, it's a new award, so our fellows have not come back and told us what this is like yet, so we'll have more information about that when we hear about it from Sammy, who's on the slide here, after she comes back. It also includes access to programming, research, internship, and career opportunities in the Quad countries. So it's not just the US, but it's also career opportunities in those other countries. So if you are really interested in international collaboration to conduct your research, the Quad Fellowship may be for you. And it also grants you membership in a Quad Alumni Network, and we'll learn more about that as we hear how students interact with the Quad Alumni Network. This award, unlike the other awards that we're talking about today, is open to international students, but it is only open to citizens of the Quad countries, which once again is the US, Japan, India, and Australia. So it's not open to students from any country, just those 4 countries. All right, next we'll talk about the Fulbright U.S. Student Program. So ASU is one of the top producers of Fulbright. We got this, this recognition last year. We've had it several years before. And what that means is that we are at the top of the list of people who are winning Fulbrights. And so there are 4 different grant types. Today, we're just going to talk about 2 because this is a presentation on how to support graduate study in STEM and social sciences. So the 2 that you would want to think about are either an award that can help you begin or complete a graduate degree program abroad, or conduct independent research abroad. So if you're like, maybe I'll take a year off before I apply to graduate school, Fulbright could be that year for you, where you propose an independent research project, you find a collaborator overseas, and you apply to Fulbright to see if Fulbright will send you over there to go conduct that research. There are over 140 different countries who participate in the Fulbright program. Fulbright exist because of a vested interest in increasing mutual understanding across the globe. So William J. Fulbright, a US Senator at the end of World War II, was like, what can we do to improve our relations with the world? What can we do to try to better understand each other so that we aren't entering another world war within a couple of years? And so Fulbright was the child of this dream. And so what it is the US sends students abroad so that they can conduct research, teach English, or conduct graduate study. And the other participating countries can send their students to the US to study. And so many times that's graduate study. But the idea is that we're not leaving diplomacy to the diplomats, to people working at the UN, to ambassadors. Instead, we are putting diplomacy in the hands of everyday people. And so the ability for someone to go overseas and say, hi, I am an American from Alabama. Here's my perception on what it means to be an American. Let's share cultures with each other. And I want to learn more about you, a person from Germany. That everyday interaction can be so much more educational than, just reading articles about other cultures, right? And so that's the whole point of this fellowship. And so every single thing that's part of this application has to support that mission. They are very interested in mutual beneficence and building mutual understanding. So the stipends and awards will vary from country to country. So one thing you'll hear a lot if you ask questions about Fulbright is it depends. It depends on the country. It depends on the grant type. But this also means that there's a lot of flexibility. So you have a lot of different options. So sometimes there's going to be hyper-specific degree programs where you can apply for a Fulbright to that specific degree program and country. Or certain countries will allow you to pick what school you want to go to and what program you want to go to in that school and propose that you go to that. So that's the graduate awards will vary from country to country. Same thing with the independent research projects. So certain countries will say you have to work with someone at a university. Others can say you can work with an NGO or some kind of other organization in country to conduct that research. So as you're thinking about Fulbright, if that's something you're thinking about, you'll want to look at those different country choices, which countries you want to go to, and kind of compare them, see what it's like in each country to get a sense of what you want to do and what you want to propose. Some of the other benefits are this is a way to build foundations for long-term international networks for collaborative research. So they're not particularly interested in supporting students who just want to go abroad to conduct parachute research, where you just drop in, do your research, leave, no one ever hears from you ever again, and you never communicate with anyone in the host country ever again. They're not interested in that. What they're interested in is supporting long-term investment, long-term collaboration. So if you are conducting cutting-edge research here in the US and you know the lab overseas, you can go work with that lab. You can study at the university where that lab is located so that you can collaborate with them while also getting a master's degree. It's whatever you want to do, depending on what the country allows and what the grants support. It is also an opportunity to advance your foreign language proficiency should you choose to go to a country that speaks a foreign language, and your cultural competency. If none of you have lived abroad before, living abroad is a very different experience than living in your home country. I mean, I know that seems obvious, but you really don't understand what that means until you are living abroad extensively. And so it will really change the way in which you see the world and interact with the world. And I think it advances our grantees' maturity when they go abroad and study or conduct research. So those aren't a limit, those aren't a finite list of all the awards we support. Those are just some examples of awards you can use to support graduate study and STEM in the social sciences. But now we're going to pivot to working with us and what it means to work with us. So I think one of the questions I get a lot is why get writing support from you all? I can work with my faculty, I can go to a writing center, why work with you all? And instead of giving you an answer, I want to turn towards one of my favorite articles about scientific writing that I share with scientists when I'm working with them. And this paragraph, I think, really can help clarify the kind of work that we're doing here. So Gopin and Swan, the authors of this article, write that the fundamental purpose of scientific discourse is not the mere presentation of information and thought, but rather its actual communication. It does not matter how pleased an author might be to have converted all the right data into sentences and paragraphs. It matters only whether a large majority of the reading audience accurately perceives what the author had in mind. Therefore, in order to understand how to best improve writing, we would do well to understand better how readers go about reading. So that's our whole approach here, is we are helping you figure out, how do you communicate this to readers you'll never meet? How do you communicate this to readers who can't ask you questions? And how do you communicate this to readers who may not necessarily be in your specific research area or your specific field, right? So we can't get too bogged down in jargon. We can't get too bogged down in technical explanations. Although that's something that you need to balance, because you also want to demonstrate you know the language and the ways in which research are discussed in your field, right? And so we help you figure out how to move beyond just presenting information and clearly communicating that information to a general audience. So to elaborate on how we read and how we work with writers a little bit more, as I've said previously in this presentation, you're going to want to work with different readers. You're going to want to get feedback from different readers. So faculty mentors, for example, they are excellent content experts, because of course they are. They're experts in their fields, right? So they can help you develop how to write a hypothesis in your field, in your research area, and what makes a strong hypothesis. They can help you with methods and methodology. Which methods and methodology are appropriate to answering the question that you are posing, and what's feasible for you as a student to be able to execute, right? It's highly unlikely that a graduate student can interview like 50 people in a semester, right? That's too big for one person to do, right? So not only is it figuring out what your methods and methodology are to answer your research question, but it's also how your research design is actually feasible for one person to carry out if it's a one-person project. If you're part of a larger lab, It's figuring out how is your work in conversation with the lab, but also how do you stand out? So it shows that you have clear contributions to what's happening in that lab. And what are the outcomes, right? So we don't just conduct research to conduct research for research's sake, but there should be specific measurable outcomes. So you know when your research has been successful, you know when you have answered your hypothesis. So these are things that faculty mentors can help you with. Fellowships advisors, on the other hand, are genre experts. So while your faculty mentors can be responsible for having the expertise to be able to tell you what is a good research question in your field, what's appropriate methods and methodology, they may not really know the ins and outs of fellowship applications. That's what we do. That's what we're experts at, right? So let us be experts and help guide you with our expertise. And so we can help better understand readers' expectations. What do they want to read in an application? What do they want to hear? And conversely, what do they not want to hear, right? There are some tricky areas that students sometimes get into that they don't know. They're unaware that this is something that can irk a reader or irritate a reader or make it might be incompatible with what they're applying to. And we help say, hey, maybe you don't want to say that way, right? So we know our readers' expectations and we share that with you. We also have a good understanding of selection criteria and how to appeal to selection criteria, how to say that you are a good fit for the award that you're applying to. You don't read these applications for a living, so you're actually not going to know what's cliche. You're not going to know what every other applicant's saying in their essays, right? So everyone's going to say, I have a real passion for my research area. I really want to help others. I'm driven to help others. Everyone says that. So we help you figure out other ways to say that with more nuance, more depth that is unique to you. So we can't copy and paste it and put it in anyone else's application. Your rationale, your reasoning for doing what you're doing is unique to you. So we help you avoid those well-worn cliches that happen in application essays. We also help with clarity. So what could be clear to someone in your field, someone who works in your lab, may not be clear to someone outside of that lab, someone outside of your field. So we help you weed through the jargon and help you communicate those larger ideas. And we also help you develop a compelling narrative. So how do you tell a story about yourself in a personal statement that makes readers interested in who you are as a student and helps demonstrate your ambitions, your talents, and the impact that you want to have in the world? The third kind of reader can be your peers. So these can be outside readers. And so they can provide feedback on accessibility. Can they understand what you're talking about? Can they summarize what you're talking about? They can also point out, issues with clarity if they are also applying. So one thing that we do is we provide peer writing workshops. So you all come together, do some kind of peer review, read over each other's essays, give each other peer feedback. And I think that that's a really good place to share ideas and also commiserate about some of the challenges that you all are facing in your applications together, and provide positive encouragement to each other so that you're not doing this alone. It's really helpful actually to talk to other people who are applying so that you know that maybe some of the challenges that you're facing aren't necessarily because of you, but it's a challenge that is just part of the application itself. So to be more specific, what does all that support mean? So we provide individual advising where you come and meet with an advisor like me one-on-one. We talk about the fellowship, we talk about the eligibility requirements, we can look at the selection criteria, anything else that you have questions about, or anything else that I think it's important for you to know as you think about applying. And we don't just do that in one meeting, it's something that we return to throughout the application process, because I don't think it's possible for us to remember everything on a fellowship's website after a 30-minute meeting, right? That's asking a lot. So it's something that we look at the material over and over again through those advising meetings. But we also talk about your writing. We can read it together. I can answer any questions that you have, and we can just work on writing. So there's many times where I work with an applicant and they just want to write in the meeting. So they write for 10 minutes and then I look at what they've written and give them some feedback. So that space is for how you want to use it. And so we do provide that individual one-on-one advising. In addition to that, we also provide writing workshops and support. Some of this will look like peer review workshops. well, that's my next bullet point actually, but we'll just skip over it then. But it also can be just drop-in writing hours. So every Monday from 10 to 12 in Honors Hall 242 for right now, this is probably going to change over the summer. Students can just drop in and write. You don't necessarily have to show me anything. You don't even have to talk with me. I mean, I would say, please talk with me. But we can talk about your goals, set some goals, say, are you going to work on an introduction today? And you go, yeah, I'll work on my introduction today. And so then you work on that for 30 minutes. I can look it over. And there's something about us coming together in a room where we're all working, where we work better. It's so for students who have troubles with like getting past that blank page, maybe don't have the best working environment, or just get distracted while they're trying to work. These kinds of drop-in sessions can be really, really productive, but they're also good for accountability. So I've had applicants who came every week for the entire application cycle as a way to check in and make progress and say, okay, next Monday I will have this done. And then they come back next Monday and they had it done. And then we make some more goals. So it's however you want to use the space that best fits your working style. Something that I firmly believe in is trying to help people figure out what works for them and then providing the resources to do that. One thing to keep in mind when we're talking about writing support is that the writing that you do and compose for a fellowships application does not happen in a vacuum. So a lot of this knowledge can transfer to graduate school applications. So in fact, one of our newly branded NSF graduate research fellows told me that the application process that he went through last semester and working on multiple drafts with me in those revisions helped him put together a better application for graduate school. And he got into his dream program, which was highly, highly competitive. And so he connected that, and he said, he thought that there were clear translatable relationship between applying for the NSF GRFP and applying for graduate school. So what you're working on in your personal statement for an award like NSF GRP can easily translate into your personal statement for graduate school. We also provide support for individual graduate level awards. So if you ever go out on the internet, you'll find that there are a ton of awards out there for students in different fields, different disciplines, wanting to make different impacts with their research. What we cover today is a very small fraction of what's available out there. So the 4 awards that I talked about today aren't the only awards that I support. I support most external awards that students can apply to that in some way affect their graduate study. And so if you're an undergraduate student and you find another kind of award that can support your graduate study, such as the Ford Fellowship, for example, come talk to me and we can talk about how I can support that application. If you find a fellowship that's hyper-specific to just your field, please still come talk to me and we can see what that support is. So I try to support graduate students or undergraduates applying to graduate school in any way that I can. And so please have that conversation with me to learn about what that support can be. All right, so where do you go from here? If you're thinking about applying to one of these opportunities, we encourage you to do some research on the fellowships. What we covered today was a very, very broad overview of some of the benefits. We really didn't talk about the eligibility requirements. We didn't talk about the deadlines. We did not talk about timelines before the deadlines. So that's all something that you would have to conduct research on. But you're also going to want to do some reflection. So again, we talked about how you should be able to talk about your career goals, your academic goals, and fit that into awards mission. So you have to reflect on what your goals are. And you don't need to arrive at one goal. You don't need to say, this is the one thing I'm going to do with my life. I'm going to work on the second floor of the Pentagon, and that's all I'm going to do. You don't need to come to anything like that. Instead, we just want to see a couple of options. What's the direction that you're going in? What are some of the paths ahead of you? Where could you go? And how do these fellowships fit in to that path? Some early reflection. We'll do a lot more reflection in our individual revising. Make lists of the graduate schools you want to go to, make a list of the awards that you want to apply to, make a list of the different careers you want to do or the different kinds of research you'd like to do. Make a list of everything that you're curious about, everything that you desire to do. This can help you not feel like you only have one choice to do something. Right, sorry about that, I accidentally flipped ahead. You also want to make sure that you're looking at eligibility requirements, selection criteria, and timelines. So that's something that's really important. So if any of these awards looked interesting to you, before making an appointment with me, please go read the eligibility criteria on the website. to get a sense of whether you're eligible. If you're unclear about any of that, then come talk to me and I'd be happy to have a conversation about that. Particularly when it comes to field and discipline questions, have a conversation about that more nuanced things, right? So there's certain criteria that are like, you have to be a US citizen. That's non-debatable. You either are or you aren't, right? But there's other ones where it's like, your research must fulfill this kind of objective. Well, that's all in how you argue that. And that's all in how you present that information, right? So don't take yourself out of the running for more ambiguous or abstract criteria. Instead, have a conversation with an advisor about that. And the added benefit is sometimes I can say, that might not work for you, but this other opportunity might work better, right? So that's why it's good to have a conversation, even if the thing that you're thinking about might not be such a good fit. There may be something else that's an even better fit. And then we encourage you to schedule with us online. So if you're thinking about either one of the Fulbright Study Research or the Graduate Awards, those are very specific appointment types. So if you want to apply to Fulbright, go ahead and make an appointment for Fulbright Study Research intake. That's for studying independently, or Fulbright Graduate Award intake, and that's for pursuing a graduate degree abroad. For those intake appointments, you don't need to decide that your specific country yet. You don't even need to decide whether you want to do it or not. If you just want to learn more about Fulbright and what the process looks like and what the timelines look like, make one of those intake appointments, and you're not committing yourself to anything other than just learning more about the opportunity and what the next steps might be if you choose to continue to apply to Fulbright. If you are thinking about applying to something such as NSF, GEM, Quad, or Hertz, please make an appointment with me, Dr. Habza. And if you're unsure, but you want to talk to me anyway, just choose a general graduate advising appointment, even if you are an undergraduate. If you don't choose general graduate advising and you choose general undergraduate advising, you'll end up with a different advisor who doesn't advise on these awards for graduate school. So to get into the right place, the right Zoom room, you want to make sure that you're making an appointment with me. So either choose the specific options for NSF, GEM, Quad, or GEM and Quad, or if you're applying to Hertz or you want to talk about one of the other awards, choose general graduate advising. If you can't decide, choose general graduate advising. All right, so we have about 7 minutes left. So what questions do we have about these awards? I see the first question in the chat. It is being recorded. So the entire thing has been recorded and we'll send it out to everyone who registered. What other questions do we have? Is anyone thinking about, pursuing one of these opportunities or having in a meeting to discuss one of them further? All right. Well, thank you for joining us today. If anyone has any questions, you can contact me at mhabza@asu.edu. Our website is right here on this final slide. I'm going to go ahead and end the recording in case anyone wants to ask any questions while we're not recording. But thank you so much, and we hope to meet with you soon to talk about one of these awards.